Now the other, we've just discovered a hidden staircase.
Yes. No.
Yeah, yes.
You're an action shot.
Yeah, now this is a live action shot. We've got fire.
Can you just tell me, it's anything look wonky?
No, it all looks. I'm not a very tidy person, so I'm not sure I'd notice anything.
Well, I'm not the kind of person who notices these things until you then see it on screen.
You see it on screen, it's there forever.
This is it. Welcome to the finest 18th century church in London. Yes. I'm Peter Babington. I'm the priest in charge of St Mary Le Strand, because I've been appointed to reopen this church and lead a major restoration of the building to make it fit for purpose in its new setting, because we're in the middle of this new amazing Strand Aldwych pedestrianised piazza.
It's completely changed from being one of the most unpleasant roundabouts in London.
It was known as an island church, but it was in a sea of traffic. The bus drivers used to call us St Mary's in the Way. But now, and the traffic was such a barrier, psychologically as well as physically.
Yeah.
And every day we're open now, people come in and they say, "Oh, I've been walking past here for 30 years,
I've never come in.
And when you look round, I mean, as you look around this space, kind of what you see is what you get. There is very little extra to this. There's a tiny vestries either side of me, with room to swing a small kitten, not a cat. And
you've got a
well, there is a crypt, but that's just 3 barrel vaults, and it's not usable space. I mean, we have possibly one of the oldest boilers in London still working. It comes from the year of the Great Exhibition in, was that 1851, 1853?
Great Exhibition left stuff in every church in London somewhere, one way or another.
We've got a very fine toilet, one toilet, the finest WC and WC2. That's and then there's the gallery space.
Put that on the poster.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a nice loo. Well, I think this is what Doctor Who's loo would look like. When I saw the Harris fencing around the outside, and then I came in, I was expecting the interior to be in a similar state of depredation, but actually it's in incredibly good order.
Well, it's amazingly good, given nothing's been done to it for 80 years. The Harris fencing's around the church because when we started doing some of our survey work our architect was doing a stone-by-stone survey, and he said it's much worse than you thought it was. So there's huge amounts of fractured stone.
There's risk of things falling.
Yeah, and there was a genuine risk of falling, and I can show you some of the bits of masonry at the back of church that we've lifted off. We're about to do some what they call holding work, pin any loose stone or net bits and stabilise the balustrade, and then hopefully the Harris fencing can come down. Magnolias and a bit of brutalist architecture.
That is the contrast.
The contrast. It's all modelled on Mary Le Strand.
Were they anyway?
Well, I think that I've been told that those vertical bits, going up, are sort of supposed to referencing the columns on the outside of the church.
So this is a 50 Churches Act church.
Yeah.
So people who are familiar on my channel should, if they've watched all my videos, know what that is. But perhaps you can give us a quick breakdown.
They ought to know. They ought to know, won't they? So in 1711, under Queen Anne, there was this act for 50 city churches, and that was going to be, the idea was to build 50 new churches for the expanding city of London. And most of those were going out towards the east, because that's the areas that were developing. But in 1549, the original St Mary Le Strand had been knocked down by the Duke of Somerset to build his palace, which is what has become Somerset House.
This one over here.
Just over there.
Yep.
That's not what he built. There's been about 3 different buildings.
Okay, so that's worth knowing. So the Somerset House that caused the previous redevelopment is a different.
So the Duke of Somerset, it was called Somerset Palace, I think, but he knocked down the original St Mary Le Strand so he could use the stone to build his palace. He was a bit of a tyrant, so he had his head chopped off before he had a chance to rebuild a new St Mary Le Strand, which is what he had promised. So for about 170 years, the parishioners of St Mary Le Strand didn't have a parish church, and they worshipped at the Savoy Chapel.
Yes.
Which is
a stone's throw away.
Only a stone's throw away. Yeah. So 170 years later, there's this new act, this act for 50 city churches proposed, and the parishioners of the Strand successfully petitioned the commission that they should have one of these new churches. So we like to say that this is the first of the 50 city churches. And I think the reason it was built here, apart from the fact that the Strand needed a new parish church, is this is the royal processional route. And Queen Anne loved her processions as a way of sort of demonstrating her piety and her power.
Where would they have been processing from? The
Palaces of Westminster and Whitehall up to the City of London and St Paul's Cathedral. Yes. Yeah. So this is still the royal processional route. Originally, this was the Strand along here, and then there was a road on that side which was known as Holywell, and there were actually other houses behind where the church is. So it was sort of like an end of a row. Okay. But it would have been facing down this the street. So as you're coming up from the west, you get this amazing view of the church, right, sort of standing in the middle of the road, almost like sailing down the Strand. The word Strand means shore, so this is the shore of the Thames. And so St Mary Le Strand, I say it's like St Mary's on the beach, it's sort of, that was the name of the church. And the west front is modelled on the north and south porticos of St Paul's Cathedral. So the architect who is James Gibbs for this church, and he was referencing Rennes as well as Rome, which was where he had trained under the papal architect, Carlos Fontana. The original plan was there was going to be a church here, and an architect called Thomas Archer, who you know from one of the other 50 city churches, he got the job of building the church. Gibbs had also submitted a plan, but he didn't get this job. He got the job of building an enormous column, which was going to be taller than Nelson's column is today, which would have had an enormous statue of Queen Anne on the top.
Okay.
And that was just outside where our gates are, on the site of where there had been a sort of, historically had been a maypole.
Oh, replacing the maypole?
Well, yeah, the Puritans had taken down the maypole. Gibbs had done the foundations for this enormous column, and the stone had all been delivered, and then Queen Anne died. So the column and the statue got cancelled, and somehow Gibbs managed to elbow Archer out of the way and took over the building of the church. So he then sort of used the stone from the column to build the church according to the plans that he had wanted to do. So the sort of foundations are thought to be roughly where Archer had laid the foundations, but then Gibbs took over the building. And this is James Gibbs' first public building, and he went on to be a hugely influential architect, not because anyone copied St Mary Le Strand, but because his next church after this was St Martin in the Fields. I mean, of course, the big thing that changed, Queen Anne had died, so the church was started in a way under Queen Anne, but then finished under George I, and the fashions had changed. It had all become much more sort of Lutheran and Protestant and simpler. So even before the church was finished, everyone was criticising it for, it's far too elaborate, overly decorated. It was kind of instantly out of fashion as soon as it was finished. So actually when Gibbs went on to do St Martin in the Fields, he did that as a simpler style. The decorations was happening around 1721, and there are letters from the people saying, telling Gibbs to stop what he was doing, because it was all too elaborate. And I think St Martin in the Fields, I think they laid the foundation stone in 1724, I think.
And I think Gibbs was a Catholic, in fact.
Yes, Gibbs was Roman Catholic. He was from Aberdeen. In fact, he was intended to be a priest. He went to Rome, to the Scottish College in Rome to study to be a priest, but he fell out with the rector and he left. And then his other great love was architecture, so he spent a lot of time sort of drawing the buildings in Rome, and he got himself apprenticed to Carlos Fontana, who was the papal architect. And then
so when we say this is his first building,
his first public building in England.
But he had a lot of experience as an apprentice.
Yeah. And when he came here, so his brother was dying, so he returned to Aberdeen, and then he came to London. And he's quite a young man still, but he was probably the most highly trained architect in the country, because these amazing people like Christopher Wren, they were engineers and builders. Yes. They weren't really architects in that sense. So but he was promoted by Wren and very much championed by Wren.
We saw some amazing plaster work in the church.
Yeah.
Was that put in when the church was built?
Yeah, 1721.
It's looking remarkable.
Which is amazing.
Quality.
And it was by a very famous London plasterer called John Chrysostom Wilkins. You might have seen his work in other places, but he was, and I think he might have
I'm
even...
just so pleased he pronounced it for me.
He might...
Just do it for me again.
So, well, some people think there were two of them. Some people said they were brothers, John and Chrysostom Wilkins, but we think it's just that John Chrysostom was an early church father, and obviously, so his parents are obviously very pious, and they gave him the name John Chrysostom. And he was, I think he was the head of the Plasterers Guild in his time, so he was, very highly skilled plasterer. And the ceiling was all hand moulded. One of the things we've discovered in our restoration project is, we thought they would have been box moulded.
Yes.
But that technique didn't come in until later in the 18th century. So the early part of the 18th century, it was all still being hand shaped.
So shaped like clay is shaped.
Yeah, and it's an amazing story of survival as well, because the church has actually survived here for 300 years.
Was there a lot of war damage?
Very little. I mean, the windows at the east end were blown out by a bomb. A bit like the story at St Paul's Cathedral, where the church watchers spent the Blitz on the roof, dealing with the incendiary bombs as they felt. It was the same here. So the then church warden and the then architect of the church kind of basically spent the Blitz on the roof, kicking off the incendiary bombs or covering them in sand or putting them in buckets,
A thousand tiny acts of heroism.
Yeah, and that's why the church is still here, because St Clement Danes, they didn't do that, and that was burnt out.
My name's Stewart
Yes.
Trotter. I'm on the PCC of St Mary Le Strand.
What does PCC stand for?
Parish Council Committee or something like that.
There we go. I've got the idea.
I've
anyway.
never really understood. I've written the audio guide to the church. Gibbs was a Scot, as I'm a Scot. I don't sound Scottish, but my DNA is completely Scottish. And he was a Roman Catholic, and he was a Freemason. Now, Freemasonry, it seems, comes from Scotland, no matter what the English say. It was developed particularly by James VI and first, and it was for real stoneworkers, not people dressing up in aprons, symbolically. It was for young men. It was a way of teaching them the truths of the Bible, and also it was like a trade union where they knew each other from secret handshakes and passwords. There was nothing sinister about it. They just couldn't read or write. Then the Knights Templar were given refuge in Scotland when they were thrown out of every other country by the Pope.
Okay.
And they fought with Robert the Bruce against the English.
Alongside, okay.
Yes, and so they were a symbol of Scottish nationalism. Now, Gibbs was a Roman Catholic and from Aberdeen, and there was one of the oldest lodges in Aberdeen, but it was multi-faith. He was a Catholic, they had Jews, they had Quakers. Can you imagine Quaker? It was a different organisation. And it was based on the Temple of Solomon. Now this is a repeat of the Temple of Solomon. There's a porch outside, which was very important to Freemasons because they believed that's where the whole thing originated, on the porch of the Temple of Solomon. Now, it goes back to King James VI and first. Now, he developed Masonry, and at Stirling Castle in 1594, built a replica of the Temple of Solomon. Now, Gibbs was surveyor to that place, so he knew it intimately, and in a sense, recreated it here. Now, the twin columns, they were part of the Temple of Solomon. We don't know quite where they were, whether they were outside or inside, but the two columns are important in the Temple of Solomon and for Freemasonry. It is the ultimate sign of Freemasonry, are the two columns. What happened was that there was a terrible, terrible fight in 1714 between the people who wanted the Stewart line to continue, the Scottish Stuarts, Catholic sympathisers, and indeed Catholics, and the Hanoverians, who were Lutheran and Protestant. Now, These are secret Scottish signs here because Scottish things became illegal after the Hanoverians. It was a bloody and terrible period. You had to have secret signs to show you were sympathisers with the Jacobite cause. So we have here the saltire, the Scottish cross there, hidden. And here we have tassels.
Are there thistles upside down?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
you've got it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's amazing. I didn't say anything, you got it.
Yes.
But it's meant to be hidden. Look, they could have been
It's hidden
executed.
in plain
They
sight.
could have, yes.
Yes.
That's the phrase. The white flowers on the ceiling
Yeah.
are emblematic of the flowers that the Jacobites put in their hats when they fought the Jacobite rebellions in 1715, 1745. There are dragonflies.
Here, yeah, I see it. I see
Yeah.
it. I
You see, now it's hidden. You see, because if it was too in your face, you'd be executed. You'll find oak leaves everywhere.
Yes.
Now, that's symbolic of the oak tree that Charles II hid in when the Cromwell people were after him. It's full of Jacobite symbolism. You'll find to the left is a winding stairway.
Yes, yeah.
Now, that was part of the Temple of Solomon. But it was also part of the ritual initiation for Masons. They had to go up a winding staircase, blindfolded, and knock at a door to be given admission. This is the spiral staircase, the winding staircase. Now, it's cantilevered. The only one that's similar to this is in the Queen's house in Greenwich.
Yes.
And I think it's based on that because, now who was the architect? Inigo Jones, that's the architect. And he was a Mason. Now it's got 45 steps up, which is a mystic number because they went 3, 5, 7, the Masons. Absolutely Masonic, leading to heaven. There's an ST and a flap there.
What's that, 1739?
Yes.
So that's going to be just after the building was built.
And there's one here. It's the same design. And what I think it is, it's the Masonic apron with the flap up. And you wore the flap up until you were initiated, and then you were allowed to put it down. So initiation came from going up the steps, knocking at the door, and being allowed in. Then there's the inner door there with 3 locks, which was similar to the Aberdeen Lodge that Gibbs came from. That
Yeah.
They had a casket with 3 locks. It means you have to have 3 different people. This is the inner sanctum. So when you were here, you were 2nd degree Mason.
Yeah.
See, he's got cherubs around here, you
Yeah.
see. But there's one up there that is actually a caricature of George I. Also, look at the unicorn there. The horn goes up and up and up. And it's taking the piss out of George I. It was a cuckold, you see. So, and there are Jacobite songs about him being a cuckold.
It is an exceptionally long horn.
Now, whether they actually had ceremonies here, we don't know. I mean, they're not going to write down, we had a secret ceremony last night, are
yeah.
they? You know.
Yeah.
There was a big fight
Yeah.
between the Hanoverians and the Jacobites. And Christopher Wren was Jacobite because he'd worked with Charles II, and they fixed it for Gibbs to get the commission. Vanbrugh, who'd done Blenheim Palace, was up for it. Gibbs had done nothing. He had done no public building, but they sort of eased him through because he was part of that Jacobite brotherhood. Christopher Wren, who in turn was led by the Earl of Mar, who was Gibbs's mentor, who became the Grand Master of the Order of the Templars and led the first Jacobite 1715 rebellion. They were building the church in Greenwich, St Alfred's, I think it's called. And
my list.
in the middle of building it, they said, we want vaults. Each church has got to have vaults. So it costs extra money. See, they're pretending here that they're foundations. They're not. They're really not. They were put there for a purpose. And the purpose we have to work out. But what they said was you mustn't bury anyone in these vaults. So it wasn't for burial. So what was it for? Masonic rites, I think. Now the other, we've just discovered a hidden staircase.
Yes. No.
Yeah, oh, yes. I mean, it is sensational. It's only a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
There are again, in the minutes, of the building commission, they say each church must have a high altar at the end, but with a room either side. Okay. Yeah. Why? Well, we found out. But look, there's a full ceiling on both the vestries, and you go up, and there is a secret staircase up and over the altar and down the other side into the other vestry room. It serves no purpose whatsoever except Masonic rites, particularly Templar rites.
So is that then referencing something in the original Temple of Solomon, or is
this is more Knights Templar, and the whole idea is you move. You see, the rooms have a window by the stairs. You move from light into darkness up to heaven as the initiation. Then you come down again into light.
How would it have been accessed by a?
Well, we don't know.
Oh, okay.
There's a little hole in the ceiling, and it's really weird. Part of the Knights Templar rites were to reenact going into the Temple of Solomon, but the Knights did, and found a secret vault where was the Ark of the. It's like Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the Delta of Enoch, it's called, which is the triangle in the high altar. You'll see in there now.
Yeah.
So part of the ceremony was, again, initiation. You went down in ropes. This is a hole where you could have ropes coming through and a winch down into the vaults where you had to find the Delta of Enoch. And they poured in noxious gas. It was like an endurance test. And you're blindfolded.
But that's the idea of an initiation.
I know. You're terrified.
Yeah.
You're terrified. Then there's blinding light.
And you've gone through a great change.
Blinding light. Yeah. And what they would do, they had burning bushes. So your whatever it's called, your blindfold, they didn't call it out, was taken off, and you were blinded. And people screamed and shouted. You know, they put shotguns and things to scare you. So it was enlightenment. It was terrifying enlightenment. And so what I think is that you have the initial initiation on the winding staircase up there. Then it's a further one when we have the Templars, the Royal Archmasonry that James VI and First nurtured and developed. That window there is the secret room.
How on earth could it have been secret? There's a jolly great window.
I know, but
but it's only accessible by this
from the vestry. I mean,
from the vestry.
Yeah, okay, that's one part of the window. If we go around here, so that's the other part of it, just there.
Yeah.
You see, you'd think it goes into the church, and it doesn't. It's very clever.
It's not accessible from the church, but there's an entrance from the vestry directly
up to it. Yes, I mean, there's a full ceiling.
Yeah.
So God knows how they did it.
No, but surely people must have noticed that there's a window with
no
room.
They don't.
Oh, but people don't.
They don't notice. Honestly, they don't put two and two together. You can have that, and you assume it goes into the church. You don't think there's a secret room. But I can show you a photo of the hidden staircase. The stairs go up that way. It's quite difficult to understand.
I completely see how that goes, and that goes up over the arch,
and that is the window there.
Yeah.
The other great thing about the vaults,
we've been in the vaults.
Yes, is that there's you'll see there's soot all over the place.
Yes.
There's soot right down there when the boiler's up there. They had rites with burning bushes, and that's why you've got these burning sort of urns there as a symbol of it. Also, now what happened was they put bodies in the 19th century, but you see they used skulls and bones as Knights Templar ceremonies. So what we've got to work out from DNA is that there's a skull, half skull, I found on a shelf, and that was big with the Knights Templar. You filled it with wine and drank from it. to say,
It's
if
another way of
if I
upping
ever
it.
betray the Templars, I will take on the sins of this man, who, so you had someone else's sins as well to contend with, as though your sins weren't enough, you know.
So that is absolutely fascinating.
Of course it is.
Well, so the big thing, I suppose, at the moment, we've got this major restoration project going on,
Yeah.
the Jewel in the Strand project. We're trying to, it's an £8.5 million capital project to see the complete restoration and redevelopment of the church building, so that it can serve this community and all the people who visit here, so the church can have a role, a purpose and a life in this new setting. And if anyone wants to support us, they can sponsor a flower on the ceiling.
There'll be a link in the description of this video.
Any support, hugely welcome.
That's nice and easy. Does it not too heavy?